Welcome to another video on Khaldor TV, everybody. In today's episode of level 10 we're going to look at another warrior. Today we are going over a build and tutorial for Stitches. Stitches is an absolutely amazing character in Heroes of the Storm. He won't win any beauty contest anytime soon, but that guy can certainly pack a punch. And not only that, but he's also one of the few warriors who can make real playmaker moves with his hook, which is probably one of the most fun talent in the entire game. And it's also something that helps you just like draw a target in and suddenly bring the fight to you. So where a lot of other warriors are trying to just like have a gap closer and jump into a fight, Stitches will always try to employ that hook to get one target isolated from the rest of the opponent's team, and then with the help of the rest of his teammates just barrels down on him, tries to take that target down as soon as possible and turns the fight into an early 4 versus 5. The build we're going to look at today is focusing a lot on Stitches' sustain, having him as one of the main tanks in your team, and this is usually the case when you run Stitches as a solo tank. We're going to talk about alternative builds, and we're also going to talk about which characters are actually best with Stitches, which characters you want to combine with him if you want to get the most out of his abilities. Talking about the abilities, let's look at his skills first. Stitches has a very nice area of effect damage skill that is called Slam, and that does a lot of damage in an area right in front of him. It's really nice if you can use that to just like take a few creep waves down and of course like push the opponent back, but also in team fights it does a serious amount of damage, and the more points you can hit with it, the better, of course. The next talent that we're having for him is Devour, and Devour is an absolutely amazing skill. Not only do you damage your opponent, but you also just like take a bite out of him and suddenly Stitches gains hit points. And that is an amazing talent for a tank because you get so much more sustain with that. When you can just simply walk into a fight and as soon as you are focused, you use Devour, you get a certain amount of hit points back, and with that in mind, you can even in a very dicey situation come out alive and move back. The next talent, of course, is the talent on Stitches. It's what makes the hero so unique, and it is, of course, his hook. He can just simply throw a hook out, and similar to characters like Pudge in Dota 2, he can then bring that target in and right next to him. And that is absolutely amazing. It works beautifully well with other heroes that have stuns that they can use to lock that target down and help the team to just simply destroy that opponent as fast as possible and then get an advantage in the upcoming team fight. A really nice talent to have, and probably the key talent that you will see with most Stitches players being executed. The sustain build that we're talking about today focuses on, especially in the early game, 3 particular talents. On level 1 we are going to take Chew Your Food as our main talent, which will increase the healing abilities from Devour. On level 4 then we are going straight into Amplified Healing, which is an absolutely amazing spell because it not only does work with Chew Your Food, but at the same time it also works very well with every single healer in the game that is going to try and heal you. Since we're focusing on a build where Stitches is usually played as a single tank in the team, you really depend on your healers to keep you alive in those fights, and you will absorb a lot of damage. So Amplified Healing is a great skill that is a great talent that is going to help you stay alive even longer. On level 4 you have a few options, but the general approach in most of the competitive plays that you will see is to go for Tenderizer. Tenderizer is a talent where your auto attacks slow down a target for a couple of seconds, and that's actually pretty cool if you then work a lot with your hook. The idea, of course, is always to just like hook a target in, get it as close to you as possible, and with your auto attacks on Tenderizer and additional stuns, you are trying to just prevent that target from escaping you. So really nice talent, it combos perfectly with your skills here, and with those first few sets we're already like starting to build Stitches towards that sustain build that we've been talking about. On level 10, once again, we have 2 heroic abilities where we can choose from, and the first one is a really fun talent to take. It is Gorge, which works, of course, again, very well with hook. You simply walk up to an opponent or hook him in, and as soon as you're close enough, Stitches can gorge and devour the target, and then for a couple of seconds it will be in your stomach. And of course that can have a couple of very bad reactions, at least in theory, if you swallow something like an Anubarak or a Fat Panda. But what happens always at the end is that you spew the target out once more, you do a bit of damage to it, and you can always just position yourself in a certain location where your team might be able to calmly take that target down. You can also use that to just walk a target behind a gate if you're currently close to one of your forts or keeps, and that helps you to eliminate that opponent too. Blizzard changed in the last patches a few of the things, so Gorge doesn't really do as much damage as it did before, and with Blizzard trying also to increase the cooldown of Hook a little bit, that's another passive ninja change to Gorge. So these days we see the second heroic ability a lot more, and that is Putrid Bile. Projectile basically emits another vile gas cloud around you, and it's really nice because not only does it slow down your opponent, it speeds you up to a certain extent and does, of course, in that poison area, damage to your opponents. And that is pretty cool, especially when you are fighting, let's say, for an objective, a tribute, a temple on Sky Temple, anything along those lines where you fight on a certain position in the map. You can use Projectile in those fights, and it's really helpful. Another thing that you can use it for is to escape, as an escape mechanism. With Stitch's comms, what you usually try to do is not jump into your opponent's team, but you're trying to always hook somebody in. You rely a lot on this hook ability. And just sometimes when you really try to get away and create space between your team and your opponent, Projectile is absolutely amazing because you can run away from the opponent and you leave that track of like poison gas on the ground, and everybody who's trying to follow you will lose a lot of hit points there. So a really nice skill to have, and this is actually the talent that is taken these days most of the time, and if you're going for the sustain build on Stitches, you should definitely think about picking it up. On level 13 we are going for Relentless. Relentless is a great talent to have because it halves the duration of not only stuns but everything that disables you. That is, for example, also affecting the Root of Malfurion and a lot of other talents in the game. And this is just amazing to keep you alive. One of the problems that you always have is if you are landing in some kind of stun combo by your opponent. First of all, you are going to struggle to use your Devour in a situation like this, and also your Projectile if you want to just rush away from your opponents or use it during one of those team fights. With Relentless, that problem is not as big anymore, and it helps you to keep you alive. And of course, we're already trying to build towards a very, very tanky character, and Relentless is just another spell or like another talent that helps us to keep ourselves alive. Throughout the entire game of Stitches, we've already been relying on our hook a lot. We've been trying to hook targets in, we've been using Tenderizer to keep the targets close and try to isolate them as much as we can, even using Projectile at points to really like chase after somebody maybe. And now with level 16 things are going to become even more fun, because now suddenly we have Fishing Hook available and we're going to pick that talent immediately. It greatly increases the range of hook for Stitches, and that makes for some amazing plays. You can nearly hook a target cross screen, and it's not only a very rewarding skill to pick up, a very rewarding talent to take, but at the same time it's also extremely dangerous to your opponent. And with this one you will be able to put the fear in your opponent's hearts, because Stitches is really turning in monster now. On level 20 we have again a lot of options. Not only do we have access to Hardened Shield as Stitches, with a focus on Projectile we can go for the Regenerative Bile, which can in situations be extremely useful to us and our team. And we also have Bolt of the Storm with a blink. And there is a very few things in the game that are as rewarding as blinking towards the target and gorging it. So you see we're already mixing our ultimates a bit up, our heroic abilities. Usually you would go for Projectile, but every now and then if you play a game you should definitely experiment with Gorge, because it's just like so much fun to play with that. Projectile these days probably the most used heroic ability, especially in competitive play, but there are options, and this is of course what we're already talking about. We're going to focus on that a bit later, but let's come back to our level 20 talents. The Bolt of the Storm is a great talent to take here because it can get you away from certain situations, but you would usually like to take that especially when you have Gorge as your heroic ability. That doesn't happen these days all that often anymore with Stitches players, and therefore we're going to focus on the two remaining ones that come into question for our talent choice here. We're going most likely for Hardened Shield, because Hardened Shield is like the talent that really helps to keep you alive in a really heated team fight. For a long time you're nearly invulnerable to your opponent's damage, and since you are going to be one of those heroes that they are going to try and focus down as fast as possible, this is probably the talent to take for you. It gives you another active skill or an active talent that you can use. Another choice would, on the other hand, then still be Regenerative Bile. And that is the case if you feel that a lot of these fights are really happening in a very close encounter. If you are able to just like spread the entire poison around, let's say a temple for example, or a certain cursed position on Cursed Hollow. In situations like this, Regenerative Bile might be the choice for you, but in general the safest option is Hardened Shield. So with all these talents already chosen, you can really see that Stitches is becoming a very high hit point tank that is extremely difficult to kill because of his Chew Your Food, because of amplified healing. You are a menace in the game and you are extremely dangerous. You're trying to hit one of your hooks, and if you do, then you always have Tenderizer to slow a target down. Your team is going to have an easy time taking down a hero or two, and especially in the late game when the death timers are just so long that it's very, very tricky to stay without a fight for like a minute or a minute and a half. You can always is then try to exploit that situation with a 4 versus 5, move in and maybe take a keep, maybe kill the core, or just like force another team fight where you might be able to take down 1 or 2 opponents. The sustain build is extremely powerful, but of course, once again, we're going to look at a few alternatives, and those focus today especially on the levels 13 and 16. Well, we are focusing today on the sustain build on Stitches. There are of course a lot of other builds out there. There's a damage build for Stitches that you can use as well, and sometimes you might want to go for a hybrid build. And in this case on 13 and 16 we would choose Mega Slam and Pulverize, because that will help you to do more damage in those fights, since you can hit an entire, like a much larger area, and maybe even all of your opponents, and you can also stun them out. And that mini stun that you get with Pulverize is extremely useful if you're trying to interrupt channeling ultimates like the Ravenous Spirit of Nazebo, which is just so important to do since he can do a lot of damage to your team. So depending on the team compositions that are being played, and depending on whether you really need Fishing Hook or not, you might want to try and play with those 2 slam talents on 13 and 16 just to get a bit more usability out of Stitches and be able to contribute more in the team fights themselves. With that being said, I hope that you guys have a lot of fun playing Stitches. He's an extremely cool character to play. He's very unique in the game, and with the build that I showed you today, you should have very good results. Make sure that if you liked the video and if you learned something today, that you give it a thumbs up on YouTube, subscribe to Khaldor TV if you like to see more guides and more competitive videos, and of course, if you have any questions to the build, then just drop a comment in the comment section and I'll make sure that I answer all of those if I can. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and I'll see you next time with another episode on level 10 here on Khaldor TV. Have a great day, guys, and bye-bye.